So welcome, all of you, to this session, our BoF session, Birds of a Feather session, Creating Personas, Introducing the Data Steward Career Tracks Working Group. Name not set in stone, might be point for discussion later. I want to, if I can go forward. I want to remind us all of the guiding principles of RDA, which are openness, consensus, harmonization, that is community-driven, nonprofit, and technology neutral, and inclusivity. So in that spirit, we'll go forward. I also wanted to give a quick overview of who we are behind this session. On the screen, you see 6 people who have been contributing to drafting the case statement for this planned working group. There are more people who have read the draft case statement until now, some of them in this room, so I want to thank you for that. But those are the people who are currently participating in the drafting of the case statement. Somebody said at a session yesterday that coordination of data stewardship is a female profession. They might be onto something here, but they might be onto something here, also looking here, but thank you for the male part of humanity for being in this room as well. So our agenda for today is to introduce the idea and the work we have done so far towards this planned working group. We will have 2 lightning talks, one from Shannon Sheridan from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in the US, and one from Micah Jetton from Health RI in the Netherlands. Liz Stokes, unfortunately, is not able to deliver her talk, so we're sad about that. But this creates space for perhaps some of you, either here in the room or online, to share your data steward pathways, if you're so inclined. So when you're listening to lightning talks, think forward. Maybe you want to share your own trajectory after the 2 lightning talks. And then we will have discussion with those in the room and those online to think about what you hear about, what you have heard at that point about the planned working group, as well as the methodology that we propose to use and the work plan that we have drafted. There are collaborative notes. There's a QR code for it if you need it. Or if you have connected in Zoom, I think Elizabeth has put them into the chat. Sharing the session with me today is Elizabeth Newpold, who unfortunately could not be here, but is joining us online. And also Micah Jetton is joining us online and will be speaking online. Oh, I'll go back. Did you get it, Romain? Nice dance moves. Okay. Anybody else scanning still? So we started this work, or this work started from a survey that you might have heard about yesterday, which is the Professionalizing Data Stewardship Interest Group did a survey of professionals in data stewardship roles. So we asked those professionals about their career paths, and we also asked them two open-ended questions about where do they see their career going. So how do they perceive their career progression, and also specifically, where do they see themselves in 5 years' time? So we asked those two questions to them. And the responses were interesting. There were I've pulled some of those responses out onto this slide, and you can see that, you know, starting from the statement that I feel there is nowhere to go from here. So basically, there is no career for me. To you know, statement claiming that burnout is awaiting, to somebody saying that they will probably move to a different, larger institution in a more senior or broader role, with a small team, who are the practical data stewards, ethics specialists. So they see themselves moving into a more managerial or coordinating role. Or, you know, there's another response: I don't have any career perspective in my organization. The job of data curation or data management is not evaluated as a research activity. And this came from somebody whose role as a data steward was placed into a research position. So they were not an administrative position, they were a research position, evaluated as such, and therefore were not really able to, in their own words, advance in that position. So you see there was a variety of statements, but the general tone was quite like, there's not really a career in data stewardship. If there is, I have to make it myself. So, you know, I advance in my own position, and I develop a career for myself in my own position. Or there was also people who said, you know, they imagined their career progressing into the direction of, for example, librarianship, where there is, you know, a clear professional established track existing. Or they saw themselves as moving, you know, laterally into another organization, or, you know, into a managerial position where they wouldn't really do data stewardship anymore, but would rather take on managerial roles. And if you're interested, the whole data set is available in Zenodo, so you can go and see all the responses to this question. But this was basically the starting point for this idea of a potential working group on data steward career tracks. And the way we see it at the moment is that we propose to approach data steward career track systematically by developing a methodology for data steward persona definition and creating a sample of data steward personas, as well as career pathways for the sample personas. So this would be, you know, the overarching objective for the working group. We were happy to discuss it later. Why we, you know, have settled on this objective is we see that there's a lot of work, and I think we can say that at the moment there's already a lot of work out there on defining data steward roles, or professionals who you know, fulfill data stewardship roles, defining what those roles are. There is ongoing work on skills, knowledge development, training for data professionals in data stewardship roles. But there is, at least the way we see it, very little attention at the moment on what happens with those data professionals once they're in their role. So once they have entered the profession, they are, you know, have started their work. What happens to them in 2 years' time? What happens to them in 4 years' time? What happens to them in 6 years' time? And there's not much attention at the moment to that, to the point that in many cases where hiring is shaped also by, for example, national professional, frameworks and so on, there is no defined role where data stewardship would fit in those national professional frameworks. So there's a lack of well-defined career paths, which in our view hinders recruitment, but more importantly, perhaps also impacts retention. So you have qualified professionals who potentially leave the profession because they don't have career progression possibilities, or they are not clear. They have to hustle for them, basically. So this is, what we have been thinking about. And how we want to approach this, you saw in the objectives part already, was to work with the persona methodology, and we'll discuss more about it later after the lightning talks. To develop these, generic personas, to develop the generic methodology for developing personas. There was lots of developing in this sentence now, but to develop a persona methodology for data stewards, develop a sample of about 12 data steward personas, and link those samples into career pathways. Why I say that we are thinking about developing a generic methodology is that we are very conscious that career tracks are depend on national contexts. They depend on institutional contexts. And the idea is to develop a methodology that would leave room for adaptation, so that we would make indications, okay, here this methodology needs to be adapted to national contexts in these and these ways. Here this methodology needs to be adapted to your institutional context in order for you to create personas that are applicable in your particular situation. So it's intended to be, in a way, a tool creation exercise that allows institutions, but also perhaps national bodies, to develop data stewardship career paths. And the image here, so persona methodology has been used in relation to data stewards in the touch context, where in a study they created 4, if I'm not mistaken, Micah might correct me because I think she was one of the authors of this. They created 4 data steward personas, but in this case, those personas were intended as users for a training tool, I think. Micah, you can expand on this if you consider it necessary. But so the persona methodology hasn't been very widely used in this context, but it's not completely new. So the idea will also be to, look at how the methodology has been already used, collect examples, and then based on that, adapt the methodology to the data steward context, basically. This was a quick introduction so that you all know here in the room and online what it is that we have been working on or thinking about. As I said at the very beginning, we are at a stage where we have a draft case statement. We hope today's session to be a session where we can gather some feedback from you on our ideas on methodology. Also later we'll show you our work plan ideas, so ideas on that. And then the aim is to finalize that case statement if we all think that this is a useful exercise, to finalize that case statement and submit it before the end of the year. So it's advanced enough of a draft that it's possible for that to actually happen. But before we get to that, I would like to invite our two lightning talks. The lightning talks oh, that's true. We have another bit before that. Sorry. So the lightning talks are intended to give insights into data steward career paths. So we have two speakers, both presenting their career path. But before we get to that, we actually want to ask a bit about your own journeys in data stewardship or related roles. And we have put 3 questions to you, which overlap with some of the questions that we put to the lightning talk speakers, but also overlap with questions that we asked in the original career track survey. So if there's a QR code, but there is also, if you go to menti.com, the access code is 88938093. It's not working. Oh, okay.
Please, if you let me share the screen, I can start sharing the results.
I'll stop sharing here, and then Elizabeth will share hers. So 8893 8093. Were you able to access? Perfect. Okay. So the first question is, are you a data steward in your current role? So are you carrying out data steward activities, data stewardship activities in your current role? And we have 9 people who have said yes, 8 people who have said no, and 3 people who are not sure. And it's actually very good. 4 people who are not sure. Thank you. And I'm actually really happy about those 4 people who are not sure, because I think it also shows that we have a definitions issue or a terminology issue here. That when we talk about data stewardship, we often don't understand each other, what we mean by it. And this is for perhaps for later discussion to keep in mind that there is that issue. Okay, so welcome all, whether you're currently data stewards or not. I think, Elizabeth, we can move to the next question. So what is your current job title? No, for all of you. Yeah, 88938093. As the previous question suggested, we have a good variety of people. We have people who are research data librarian, principal data steward, data scientist, service scientist, RDM, data manager. But then we also have head of research data, head of research support, department head, head of the open science, head of something else that I cannot read, executive director. So on one hand, it's people who are actually actively carrying out data stewardship roles. And I would understand why you might be interested in career progression possibilities and pathways. But then I'm happy that there are also people in the room who actually, can make those decisions about career pathways for data stewards and set those up in their organizations. I think we can move to the next question. And then where do you see yourself professionally in 5 years? Same spot.
I was going to say, why people are adding to this one, I was just going to say that these are 3 of the questions that we asked in our survey just quite a while ago now, but it'll be nice to share I think it'll be nice when we do the collaborative notes to do a comparison of the word clouds, just to see the differences. But I think as we had in our original survey, data steward as a job title wasn't the top one, and I think we can see from this as well that it wasn't the case either.
Yeah. Okay, and I think it would be also interesting because we asked also this exact question, right?
We did.
And I mean, and I remember from the survey we also got the same don't knows, not sure's, same spot. I don't think anybody said rich and famous, but maybe.
But if you're going to be rich and famous as a data steward, remember your friends in the room here.
Yeah. Other managerial position, probably doing the same job at the same place, hopefully doing similar work but getting paid more. At least inflation adjustment, I hope. I think, Elizabeth, if you scroll a bit, I think there are more down.
I'm sort of there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, my scroll wasn't working. Sorry.
Hopefully same job but grade higher. I wonder what that would mean if it's the same job. Okay, salary grade. Okay. Similar but more AI oriented in a university, in a more decision-making role, senior project manager, in a private company. So I think also here, actually, Elizabeth, I think the responses match quite nicely to the ones that we had to the survey. So also shows that, the career progression is either towards a managerial role or, staying basically in the same spot, hoping that perhaps you get paid more, but you stay in the same spot. Or, doing a move out of at least your current organization, and perhaps, from academic setting into a private setting, or something along those lines. So you align with the 241 people who we surveyed the last time quite nicely. So thank you for that. And now I would like to invite Shannon. To share. Okay, and you can, if you want, I can push them forward or other. Yeah.
Okay. Start my timer. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Shannon Sheridan. I am the Research Data Librarian at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. A little context setting. So PNNL is one of the United States Department of Energy national labs. There's a whole group of us. What that basically means is the Department of Energy gives money to the company that runs our lab, and our researchers are primarily grant funded, which will be important a little later. We have about 6,000 employees, roughly 3,000 of which are researchers. We are a primarily research performing organization, so we don't really have students, aside from some interns that come through a variety of programs. How data stewardship works at PNNL is currently very dispersed and ad hoc. So most of the action is happening in research computing, which happens to be the division that I am a part of. I am in research information services, which is another name for the library, but we work with a variety of research computing team members to provide data services. We don't have like a centralized group, a centralized location, a mandate to perform data stewardship. Basically, what we have is a group called the Advanced Team, which was a member of a couple of people that were interested in providing data stewardship support for our researchers and who said, we're going to do this. If you give us money from your project, we can come and help you in a variety of data stewardship capacities. And so why that's important is because most of our researchers are grant funded, what that means is any services that they need from different groups around the laboratory, so whether that's data services, whether that's communications support, they have to pay for it out of their own grant. So if a project wants me to work on their project, they have to provide me a charge package to actually do services for them, which in some respects can be helpful, but in a lot of respects, coming from somebody who used to be an academic librarian, felt very limiting because I wanted to help all of the people with all of the things. Next slide, please. So how did I become a data steward at a national lab? So my original training was in library science in the United States. That's a master's in library and information science. I am right, I think, at the end of being able to call myself early career. I got my library degree in 2017 and kind of segued from there into the data career. Now, when I originally went to school, to library school, I had a humanities background. So I had studied history, Spanish, political science. So of course I ended up in medical librarianship. Almost accidentally, it was one of those people in grad school were telling me, get as much experience as you can. So I was looking for all of the internships, the part-time jobs, and one of them, one of the three that I had, was a internship at a hospital library in the city of Pittsburgh. And I really enjoyed the work. I mean, I enjoyed librarianship in general, but I also enjoyed specifically working in the medical arena because I felt like I was really making a difference, both for the patients and the doctors and nurses that we were working with. And so when I was looking for my first full-time job, I was like, well, let's look at all of the liaison librarianships. So I was looking for medical, health sciences, life sciences, but also with my humanities background, history, general liaisons. I was a new grad. I was desperate for a job. And I say first, but it was actually a really good offer, was for a fellowship from our National Library of Medicine. So if you're familiar like with PubMed or NCBI, the NLM is the institution that builds and maintains and supports all of that. So it was a 2-year fellowship in health science librarianship. I was really excited about it. It was a great experience. And one of the things that I realized there was that they were doing a lot of the traditional health science librarianship work, but they were also making really big strides to become more cutting edge when it came to support for data services, data librarianship. They run all of the databases out of NCBI. So there was a lot of cutting edge work that was happening there. And I had taken a couple of classes in grad school on data management because it seemed like the new hot topic and felt like something that I should at least be passingly familiar with. And so at NLM, I did a lot more work in the data side of the house with the projects and the people that I was working with. And so when I finished the fellowship, I once again needed a job. And so I was looking both at health science librarianship specifically and data librarianship specifically. And that search went fortunately a little bit better. And I had a little bit more time to figure out what I really wanted to do. And I got an offer from the University of Wyoming for their data librarianship position. It was a new position. They never had a data librarian before. Honestly, it sounded perfect. It was a really great, job description. If anybody's ever been to Wyoming in the United States, it's very close to the Rockies. It is lovely. And so I was like, yes, I'm going to buy in and I'm going to do data. And so I was there for a couple of years. and then was looking to move back to the East Coast and was looking for positions. And PNNL, I actually am working remotely, which is lovely. But it was a very similar setup to Wyoming in terms of what they were looking for in a data librarian. And it was also the first time they had ever had a data librarian. So again, there was a lot of flexibility in saying, in determining what I would do in that role. And so primarily my job responsibilities now fall into education and consultation. So I am consulting, working, embedding with a lot of projects to do data management, but I also have a little bit of leeway and overhead funding to do general education on data management best practices for our researchers, which I really liked. I was really worried I wasn't going to get to teach anymore. I still get to teach plenty. So career path then, now at the lab. I probably will stay at the lab. I'll just be upfront because I really enjoy the work. It is remote. It is better paid than most librarian positions in the United States, and the benefits are really good. So, from a personal perspective, I am not in a hurry to leave. Were I to advance, and part of this is kind of the limiting factor, hypothetically, the way our hierarchy works is we're in groups, we're in teams, groups, divisions, directorates. So it's very hierarchical. Everybody is in very strict job categories. Technically, my title is not even research data librarian. Like, we get to kind of pick our own descriptive job titles to help people better understand what we do. But my job category is just research librarian, along with the rest of my team. So hypothetically, were I to advance, it would be to a team lead. So my team right now is Research Information Services or the library. But what that means is somebody, being my current boss, would have to leave for that position to become open. And even if it did become open, because I would now be a team lead and not just a data librarian, it would be a shift in responsibilities. I would be in charge of whoever the next data librarian would be, but also our review and release process, our collections, our bibliometrics work. And so it's like, yes, it's a career path, but it's not a data career path specifically. I will say, when I sent these slides, because we're a lab, we have to have all of our materials reviewed. So my boss saw these slides before I got to present them. And she was very quick to point out, but like, hey, like, don't worry, like, just so you know, like, you could move to other positions in the lab. And that is true. Like, there is a lot of movement between teams and groups across the lab, but it's also very ad hoc. It's also like, hey, this team is looking for somebody to lead them to be, data stewardship, or maybe hypothetically in 5 years, we might create a new team that is a data team, and then I could move into that position. But like, as it stands, if you're looking very linearly, there's not a lot of room or advancement for someone who is specifically a data librarian. And that's the end of my slide. So that's where I am. But I do want to point out, I am very happy where I am. So I don't want this to sound like a criticism. But yeah. I don't know if you're going to do questions.
I think we can do questions later. That was the idea. But thank you so much. And now I will ask Maaike.
Yeah, thanks so much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. So really nice to hear about Shannon's career path. There is a little bit of similarity with my career path, though I think we're in different organizations. So maybe start a little bit on my background. So I'm Maaike. I'm currently a FAIR or data lead at HealthRI in the Netherlands, and HealthRI is a pretty young organization. We actually have people in current role who are working within HealthRI as well, but then in a little bit of a different role. Annalot is there. So we're pretty young. We were and are still a foundation. We got only like small budget. We were a foundation that is kind of working with, well, using men and women power from different organizations to kind of run activities. And then at a certain moment, a few years ago, we got this huge grant from the Dutch government. So 69 million. So that kind of changed us from being a small foundation into actually a big organization. Our funding is only temporary, so we need to make sure that in the end we embed all the activities that we're currently doing either in the hub where I sit, so centrally in the Netherlands, or in one of our nodes, where colleague Anne Lotte, who's also in the room, currently sits. So we need to get into how do we sustain our own organization. We are focused at health data. That's what, hence our name, health research infrastructure. We try to provide better healthcare for citizens and patients by reusing health and life sciences data. So I know health and life sounds a lot health, but we also include life science data and life sciences for health data. And we're creating an integrated data infrastructure to make sure that we enable data-driven research, innovation, and policy. And I think the latter is really interesting and relevant as well. So it's not only focused on primary data focused at secondary reuse in research, but also, well, to help stimulate innovation and change policies on a national level in the Netherlands. So we have different elements. So we're bringing parties together. So we do stuff around community management. We try to change legislation. We do policy stuff. We work with funders together. But we also are actually building a actual shared health and life sciences data infrastructure. And to be able to do that, of course, we need to facilitate in a few years' time. It's only starting. We only started a few years ago. Run a comprehensive package of essential services and tools in a national data portal. You can see on the right side of the picture that we work, as I said already, I'm in the hub, and we have different nodes. So we currently have 8 nodes within the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a small country. 7 of our university medical centers are actually our nodes, and then we have a technical university that is our 8th node. And we're currently establishing domain-specific nodes as well, or domain-focused nodes as well. For instance, we have an oncology node focusing at the oncology domain, and a cardiovascular node focusing obviously at the cardiovascular domain. And there are, well, proper chances that we will run similar domain-specific nodes, like maybe for rare diseases, maybe for neurodegenerative diseases, etc. So we're looking within our organization, we're currently growing also in the domains we're catering and the work we're doing. Next slide. So where I currently sit is, I couldn't have thought when I was back in 2013 that I would currently sit where I sit now. So I started actually, well, doing my PhD. It took a long time before I finished my PhD. So while doing my PhD, I was also working in the library as Shannon started as well. And since I was one of the few persons that were doing a PhD at that time, I helped actually led the project that established the policy in research data management, created the services. I was product owner for a while as well of one of our data services. And I actually hired all the data stewards, or we established having data stewards in the different departments. And that is something that, having a research background, that by accident came on my plate. I'm a religious scientist by training. So it's kind of nice to see that I grew from being a religious scientist into the health domain, a health and life science domain where I sit right now. So that actually happened because I was working on a national level with our predecessor, so the Tech Center for Life Sciences, which is a kind of establishing Health Thrive from that position of being a very small organization. And that was a colleague, and I asked that colleague, well, it seems really nice what you're doing on the national level. Do you have a job? And then he said, oh, nice that you're interested. You're doing really nice work at your own university. Do you really want like move into being on a national level? And then I moved from my specific, well, I didn't have like a specific domain I was focusing on because I was working in a library. We catered all disciplines. And then I moved into the specific health and life sciences focus. I wasn't hired as a data steward. I'm not even sure what I was hired as, just doing data steward stuff. I was the person doing data management plans, but now more on a national level, talking to the funders. I became more and more of an expert, but I was kind of on my own. And then we got this huge grant, and I had the opportunity to expand there. So currently, since I would say 2022, I'm in a, well, growing into a bigger team. First, something we call the FAIR team. Now we kind of transfer that to data team, because FAIR is taken as very technical, while data team, the data is something everyone does. So a lot of people kind of recognize. And I'm currently leading a team in a hub that has more than 10 persons, including some data stewards, but also metadata specialists, like service people on service desk, those are various people there. Yeah, next slide. And if you ask, how did I actually become engaged in data stewardship? So having a research background really helps. I have a lot of empirical research skills. I was one of the persons that was very open to change. So I did a lot around open data and research data management practices, even without knowing that something like data stewardship and well, data as a profession really existed. You could say I was a little bit a data-oriented researcher, and currently I would say I'm a research-oriented data steward. So to me, these are two sides of the same medal. It kind of helps that I'm a very people-oriented, community-oriented person. So I'm a combination of a doer and a connector, and very funny. We did this personality test recently. It's called Insight Discovery, and I'm really yellow there. So I'm very extroverted, I'm radiant, I'm friendly, I'm positive. I do a lot around human relations because then I really thrive. I'm well, persuasive, democratic, social, and that kind of helps having those color, which is yellow, in the job of a data steward. If you then look at like future career path, I have a question mark there because I think it's very challenging. It's a little bit similar to what Shannon is saying. So from the organizational perspective, we are a very young service providing organization. There is hardly any hierarchical structure. So that means there's a lot of flexibility and fluidity. You could become whatever you want to be, but you need to show that you're able to do that. So I could take a more technical job. I could become a metadata specialist. I could become more involved in policy, or I could become a community manager. I'm actually doing a little bit of all of those jobs, but then now currently as a team lead. So on a personal perspective, I think the next step, as Shannon said, would be even more managerial, but that means that it's less content and less data oriented. So to me, that feels less attractive because I really want to be, well, in and around the data steward job. So that leaves a big question mark. What does that bring for the next 20 years? If like in those recent years, I've switched, not in organizations, but in jobs or in roles a lot. So maybe I was thinking maybe you could switch again between domains or switch between organizations, or what is very attractive as well, maybe move towards a more expert job. I think that it is very challenging because I've seen already moving from Radboud University to Health RI, the fact that it was a very new organization, like health oriented, life science oriented, which I was not my background. That is the fact that made the switch of a job attractive, but how often and how many domains can you switch between? So I'm really happy that we're having this Birds of a Feather session to talk about career path, and yeah, hopefully my my career track kind of leads to a good discussion about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. Do we have any questions to Shannon or Micah? Yeah, Meredith has a question. Getting my steps in.
Thank you for both the presentations. My question is, so as a manager, I have to create job families. So to be able, there is no job family for data stewards. So how, that's one of the things I do is make sure that the staff are engaged in that conversation so that that growth path is there. But I guess my question is that normal? Does everyone have that job family? Or like we have data science librarian is new at many of the positions. So are those job families just now being created? And so we have a chance to make a difference, or does anyone have an example of a job family already created?
I think this is exactly what we want to do. You are.
Could I respond to that? Hi, I'm online.
Oh, do you want to respond? Okay, go.
Can I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Annelotte. I'm the colleague that Maaike was referring to. So I'm also from the Netherlands. I work in one of the large university hospitals. When I started out 6 years ago, there were no data stewards. And now I'm leading a team of 5 data stewards, 1 research software engineer, and 1 data project manager. But it's been a struggle because I can't hire these people as data stewards because the job title doesn't even exist in my institution. And it's a battle with HR basically. So now I'm hiring these people as well, some are even listed as IT developer while they are data stewards. And for us in the Netherlands, it's a national discussion because my institution won't add the function, the job title of data manager, of data steward to sort of the function families unless all university hospitals do the same. So it's sort of a national discussion, and my influence on that is very minimal.
Thank you. I'll pass to Kim.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Kim. I'm head of research data support at the library. I recognize what you say and also what was said online. These jobs are emerging. I've started to create different sort of jobs in my department. When I started 4 years ago as a I'm having a managerial position. There were only data managers, they were called, and data consultants, and data steward as a job title didn't exist. We still don't use the job title data steward because in the Netherlands it is an ICT profile. At the library, everyone is being hired as a subject or a specialist scientific information. That's well, the job title we use for almost everyone at the library, which is a research support position. And that is, speaking of career path, that is a good one because it helps not coming from an ICT profile, but coming from a research support profile. And that is helping in going to another job. What I've also seen in people who are leaving the library for another position, that is always the same, but more in depth or another domain. So that's what I wanted to add. Oh.
So at University College London, we do have data stewards, and it is a career family. So it was created as such because it was a new department that started as a kind of hybrid professional services research department. Again, not a library department, but we managed to create these 5 different career paths, data stewardship being one of those. And we could do that with grades 6 to 10 actually all being part of it. And hence I actually have kind of 2 job titles, my old one of being a head of research data and research data services, as well as a principal data steward, because it kind of covers multiple things. And actually research data services, whilst it's mostly manned by people who have the title of data stewards, we actually have other people involved as well on some of the more technical aspects. But we have those 5 career paths. We have just been starting up a community of practice for data stewardship across the university, because there are loads of people who do data stewardy things but aren't recognized as being data stewards. And we certainly include our library colleagues in that. So we have librarians working in the research data management team, and yeah, we think of them as being data stewards like us. They have a slightly different set of responsibilities and things that they get involved in their day-to-day working, but very much part of the thing. I mean, Vicky was instrumental in setting up this community of practice. And we found all sorts of people around the university doing data stewardy things, but who don't have that title. But because we were set up as a new department with a lot of wrangling with HR, and HR are the blocker, because I don't know why, they just seem to like things that fit in the categories that already exist. But yeah, we did manage to get that in place.
Yeah, if okay, can I react from online as well? Is that okay?
Yes, please go.
Yeah. So actually, in addition to what was just said, I think even if you establish formally the job of a data steward, it's still very challenging. We've seen, I don't know whether you've read that article in Science, or the column in Science by Marta Teperek and Maria Cruz from the Netherlands. Even if you have a formal job profile as data steward, that is sometimes or quite often challenging, because indeed it kind of limits your opportunities to move, like for instance in the research domain. So ideally the data steward should be positioned somewhere between support staff and science or researcher position, but that hardly fits into the formal system. So even if you have a very well, the data steward formally into some of the formal systems, the fact that you can't grow as a researcher can grow, even knowing that researchers have other limitations like lack of funding and not formal positions, not long-term positions. It's really hard to move from once being in a library or support staff back to research again. So I think there are many challenges around the data steward job profile, even if it's formalized.
I'll take one more comment from Magdalena, and then we'll move on. But all other comments that you have at the moment, please to put them into the collaborative notes.
Also,
I'm Magdalena, I'm from Poland. And in Poland is slightly even a different situation, because we don't have something like a research librarian, data librarian. We just step the careers. It's like library assistant, librarian, senior librarian, and then curator, I think, kustosz, curator. Sorry, it's even sometimes try to translate. And for example, I'm working in the I'm the head of the Open Science Competency Center. And if you look at my team is composed from senior librarians, library assistants. But and I had problem to hire someone, because in the advertisement at the university page, I had to put, for example, librarian. And then I put a description of the, let's say, data steward, more or less description job. And I didn't really have, applications because it's very hard to, to hire data steward when you have the big, librarian. So.
Thank you. Elizabeth, I think you had a comment.
Sorry, yes, I was just going to say, on a different topic, there is another question in the chat about, which would be really just nice to take, I think, about if there's anybody's got a recommendation on how to start building a career as a data steward.
Does anybody have recommendations on how to start to build a career as a data steward? Recommendations for how to start to build a career as a data steward? Silence.
I can maybe step in there just to provide an example. So actually recently hired a metadata specialist, or I wanted to hire a metadata specialist. And this was one of my, well, now current team members. She just came in with a very open research background. And I asked her a lot of things around FAIR and research data management, pretty complicated question if you have no idea what it is about. And to my surprise, she answered all the questions. I don't know. I really have no idea. She did not even say, hey, that's something I really would like get into that. I read a lot about it. She did not even do like the usual talk that you do at interviews. And I found it really challenging, no, really inspirational actually, to see that she was so open, did not have like perfect answers already. And we hired her as a metadata specialist, and she's now actually data steward / metadata specialist. And she's now half a year in our organization, and she's doing perfect. She's open. She's open to learn. She's open to grow. She's open to new ideas. She's very flexible. She has a research background. So I know there may be the usual advice. Do read about fair data. Do read about data stewardship. Do read about data management plan. Go start connecting with persons. Do start maybe internship, things like that. But sometimes it is as easy just to apply for a job and be really open and share who you are, the personality you have. Maybe you're outgoing or you're very like detailed, working, could be a perfect metadata specialist in this case. I don't know, just being yourself sometimes is pretty refreshing, and just saying where you would like to be in a few years, and that the data field is a nice field, because we do need so many more data stewards and they're very hard to get. So I don't know, sometimes the advice is just be yourself.
And I think it also shined through both Micah's and Shannon's talk that, you know, openness to new things and willingness to learn. And I think what Micah just said about this being a new, very quickly developing field. So in a way, everybody is new all the time. So even if you enter as somebody new, I don't think it necessarily puts you in disadvantage if you're open and willing to learn. I see, Roman, that your hand is up, but let's keep it for a second. Yeah. Because I do want to make sure that we have a bit of time to discuss what we actually plan to do with this potential working group. So I mentioned before that the idea would be to develop a methodology for data steward personas. When we think about personas, they are fictional representations portraying typical roles. So we've had two specific profiles of two specific people today, but personas would be like abstract role descriptions, but personalized enough to give like a story. So they're usually, I think there was a siren going before, so I hope it's like not bad. But sorry for the online people, it's quite disrupting because there's sirens outside and there was a big siren before and it's raining really hard. So I got distracted by it. So we want to work, we develop these data steward personas, so fictional, typical roles. The initial set of criteria that we have been discussing that should be informing those personas would focus on, you know, the type of organization the persona data steward is situated in, where in the organization they're situated in. So, for example, IT or library or something else entirely. What career stage they are at. How did they enter into that position? So something about their background. Which potentially is not only educational background, but also something else yet to be determined. And, you know, their career path up to date. And then by creating this methodology of how to create these personas, we would also create a set of about 12 personas that we would then plan to link up into career paths, to have like model career paths that could be adapted, modified to local contexts. There are open questions here, but very quickly before we get to this discussion, I want to show you the planned work plan that we have been drafting up until now. So working groups are 18 months, and we have divided it into 3 sub work packages, let's say. So the first one would be desk research and initial methodology development, which would include landscape analysis. On the one hand, studying existing persona development methodologies, because it's a methodology that's quite used in IT, so user research and so on. So look at how the methodology is being used until now in other fields, study existing work on data steward career tracks. So what is already out there on career tracks? As far as we know, not much, but there is some. And there is upcoming work on that, for example, in Australia. And collecting also job profiles. So today we had 2, personal profiles, but we would also collect, existing job profiles from job ads, organograms, wherever we can find them, basically talking to you, all of you in this room. And this would be kind of like the desk research part of the work. Following that, we would define the methodological approach to data stewards persona development and create those initial set of personas. And from there, we would actually want to move into co-creation, where we take our initial methodology proposal and the initial set of personas and have workshops with people like you to actually see that we develop a methodology that is adaptable to different contexts and covers aspects that would be really useful, so that, it would be adaptable. So it would be modular enough that people could take it and adapt and develop personas in their local context. And also look at the initial set of personas and basically in the co-creation process, work on them, make them more detailed and so on. And then the last stage would be, building on the co-creation, making the initial set of personas and methodology more refined. Probably build in another round of co-creation of participant validation, basically. So take the more refined methodology and initial set of personas back to the workshop participants to say, okay, is this what you envisioned? And then finalize it with, proper set of documentation and so on, so that the outputs would be reusable, basically. So this is the work plan. So you see it's on the one hand, desk research heavy, and on the other hand, we really want to work with the community in settings like these. So RDA plenaries. If you look at the time frames, it works out to having a workshop potential in Brisbane, and also having a workshop at a couple of virtual events, because it would have to be both in person and virtual to get the broadest community engagement. Are there any questions, or I would actually just open the discussion and talk about both the methodology and the work plan. If these ideas make any sense, are they potentially useful? So any feedback if we,
Thank you, Lise. I think this is, of course, an excellent idea, because we're all trying to figure out, how to make data stewards what they do into something that they can enjoy and experience better, for longer term. But I just wanted to mention, so in Skills for EOSC, we have created a minimum viable skill set, which I feel could contribute to this. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I haven't seen it yet. So yeah, so that's just what I wanted to mention, because I know this is a much broader concept of the persona, but I just want to mention, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing up the minimum viable skills. So those of you who don't know, there's a Horizon Europe funded project in Europe called Skills for Yosk that has developed these minimal viable skills profiles for open science professionals, basically. And they have minimal viable skills profiles for data stewards, both the generalist and an embedded profile. And as I said, we are aware of that. In our view, it's focusing on the skills, competences, and training bit, and not on the career tracks. So, you know, it would obviously inform the personas, but it doesn't get at what we are trying to get at, which is that career track aspect of things. But thank you for bringing it up. I think it's also interesting for people in the room, perhaps, who are not familiar with it.
I'm in the United States, and I have two statements for this. We don't have a standard statement of what a data steward is. So first of all, we need a definition. And then it varies by agency. So federal government versus an academic institution versus a private company versus, and the steps you take are different everywhere. So is there a way, and that's just my little world, right? So is the working group looking at how it's different across the world and how we can standardize, or is the goal just to have an example out there? And my final statement is the personas, the methods you're using, that's right on. Use the UX examples, they're perfect.
Thank you for the endorsement for the method. I think you raised something that is really important about lack of uniformity in, you know, there's also in Europe, I don't think there's a, you know, shared definition of who data steward is. And, you know, a data steward in Germany, for example, I think is much more of a data manager than data steward in the Netherlands, who is much more in a advisory type of training type of role. So one of my own questions to myself is actually, can we even call it data steward career tracks, or should it be more kind of like something professionals, data stewardship professionals, career, something like that? Because I think data stewardship as a concept is more shared and more understood uniformly across the globe. And data steward, that the role, the title is perhaps less uniform. So I think this is a big open question. In terms of if you're trying to do something that's would standardize globally, I don't think it's really possible. And that's why the intent would be to develop exactly a methodology that then could be adapted to local conditions. So, you know, in the US, you would be able, in your particular, you know, agency setting, for example, take the methodology, use the modular aspect of it, say, okay, here I need to think about this, and that. Okay, you know, this is how I can adapt this methodology to me. This is how I can create the personas for my organization or for my agency, and then you know, this is the potential career path for professionals in data stewardship roles in my organization. So I don't know, Elizabeth, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we recognise what you raised, the issue about that it does look different in different countries and that it looks different in different organisations. But what we also wanted to do with the working group is sort of build up a repository or something of these different examples as well, so that people aren't starting from scratch, and that they can, as Elise just said, to adapt the methodology, but also to look at that and build. I think we want to build up a shared resource that can then be contributed to from across different regions, and you know, we can't cover everything in a short time scale, and there's always nuances you know, within a country, within a type of organization. But hopefully there's some sort of commonalities that we can start to pull out that will help with a shared understanding to help address, hopefully, some of that issues that we see that people have talked about career progression, and that if career progression could be about moving across sectors or moving disciplines and things, and so having that sort of these sort of understanding or examples of what these career paths or roles might look like in different organizations maybe could help with people understand how they can have movement and progression as well, and what the sort of experiences that are needed. I think that's one of the sort of wider aims and objectives of the work as well.
Yes, because one of the planned deliverables would be that set of, you know, we say 10 to 12, because we're trying to be not overly optimistic in what we can achieve. You know, if in the process of co-creation, we are actually able to create more, it would be lovely. But to have that set, that would, you know, then be a practical example. I see that Andrew has his hand up online.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So two comments. One on this last conversation, especially thinking about, you know, examples from different countries where we do know that there's different types of training that you can get. For example, my understanding in the Netherlands, where I live, is that there's basically no library degree programs, whereas in the US there is a library degree program, and that qualifies you to do certain things. I actually think that we can learn a lot here in the Netherlands from, for example, American style research librarianship, especially when it comes to these sort of more hybrid profiles that mix research and sort of support or professional staff work, especially where the research is sort of oriented towards the, you know, improvement of support services that you give in data stewardship or whatever we're calling it. So I actually think something interesting might be to generify even region specific so that other regions can actually see in more general terms what other types of career models might look like in terms of how you progress. So if you just start as a sort of purely professional, are there ways that you can move more into research, and what would a model for that type of career be? My second thought is this sort of last bullet, what else do we think about? I've heard HR come up, I think, a couple of times already in this conversation. So in terms of who the target is, again, HR has come up, so I assume HR is in mind, but would it also sort of be useful to have like a business case for the existence of these different types of positions, especially if HR is indeed a bottleneck, as I think someone referred to it. So really kind of also making sure that the personas aren't just about targeting the right managers or organizations, but specific key decision makers within those organizations and what information they need to see the value in not just the career, but the career path across time.
Yes, I agree with both what you just said. And I'm just trying to, this is the case statement draft, and I'm just trying to scroll down to.
Look at the stakeholders.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm blanking on where we are with them.
Sorry, I've been pretty sick, and I registered on a whim the other day, so I haven't prepared as well as I would have liked to.
Oh, we haven't shared the actual case
Yeah.
statement
Oh,
yet,
okay.
so
No, no,
don't
it's
worry.
Yeah.
We did have some stakeholder sections. I
Yeah.
can't remember where it. Yeah, there. Yeah, broad spectrum community.
So recruiting managers in organizations is a key stakeholder that we have identified for this indeed. And I
Help
think
putting
that
together business cases as well is listed.
Yeah.
So,
and I think for sample personas, I think there's definitely room to have, you know, sample personas that would be then more geographically specific. And then when linking them up into the sample pathways, there could be conceivably, you know, a US or North American specific one, or then, you know, something along those lines. As said again, it will then also come back a bit to this co-creation workshops, who's there and what we were able to achieve in them, obviously, as well as, who will join the working group and who is available to contribute. Are there any further comments, questions?
Yeah, thanks. So I don't know if I missed it. So we're talking about personas geographically, but I'm coming back to what you said. Are we talking about personas across different like RPOs or private RPOs or industry? Are we looking at personas based on those sort of contexts as well?
So this goes back to the methodology, because when the main deliverable would be methodology, right? For developing data steward personas. And in the methodology, it would definitely, that would be part of it in terms of, okay, in order to develop a data steward persona, you need to know which is the organizational context for it. And then the samples that the working group might be able to produce, that will depend on who is part of the working group. And if we're developing the samples that are RPO specific or research infrastructure specific, that will come down to what type of samples we're able to develop. But the methodology itself is planned to be flexible enough and definitely include, that organizational context as something that in order to develop a persona, you need to take into consideration organizational context. Does that answer? Yeah. Do we have any comments, questions online?
I've been copying into the notes. I think mainly the comments are things on chat. There's something about timescales, which I think is interesting because we haven't really talked about what sort of what chunks we want to look at in terms of the timescales for how we track a career. In terms of timescales, somebody's put experience that it's less defined. Starting up a team can be challenging for about 5 years, and then when routines become more established. So I think that's actually an interesting point, because I think what's come out of some of the discussion, I think, is I think Mikey and Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong, that you've both actually started quite often in either the first time that somebody's had that type of role or in newly established teams. And I think whoever said from UCL, or was it Nick? I can't remember, about managing to get a new teams established. So I think that's also quite interesting that a lot of these are being built up in relatively new teams or relatively new posts. So we do need to think about, as Mikey said in her talk, what about 20 years time? But we probably don't want to think 20 years time. Are we thinking 5 years, 2 year slots? We need to think a little bit about, if we're talking about career paths and tracks, what sort of timelines are we thinking about? And that's just an open question, I think, still for us to develop in the group, but is a nuance that we perhaps want to think about, which is different from a very established profession. So I think that's there's something still to think about, but not got an easy answer, I don't think.
This is more of a question, and not to answer the question about timescales, because it's been a minute since I read the case statement, and I am not super familiar with like the persona methodology, but is there room in there to produce some sort of deliverable that is more, I don't want to call it actionable, but something that like a manager or an HR department could very easily pick up and be like, here's the persona for a data steward in an academic setting, here's a draft job description, or here's a case statement to make to HR for why you need this kind of person. Is there room for that in this group, or is that perhaps a bit out of scope?
In my view, if then related to that sample personas. So I think there's room to think how we develop those sample personas, what form to they take. Because Liz Stoke from ARGC, who was not able to join today, she's been making this exact point as well, and pushing us to think in that direction of how can we make this as actionable as possible, thinking also in terms of infographics and so on, that we when I say we, I mean Elizabeth and I at this point, we still need to digest a bit to figure out exactly what we are able to do in 18 months time, so that we wouldn't over commit. But I think related to those personas, the sample personas and the sample career paths that we would do with the sample personas, I think there's room for something along those lines. Definitely.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, I know Mikey's got a hand up, but I was just going to say what I think we're coming from the perspective is we want this to be useful. And I don't know, the RDA always wants their outputs to be adopted, but putting aside that RDA perspective of wanting them to be adopted, we don't want to do this if it's not useful. And so definitely we want to think about things, but as we do have to think about what can actually be achieved within a working group. And I would just say on that note as well, I'm going to use it as a plug that if people would like to be involved in contributing to the proposed working group, because we've still got some drafting to do, then please do email myself or Lisa, and we'll happily to include as many people as we want to get this right, because we do want this to be, useful for RDA community. So.
Micah, go ahead, and then after Micah, we'll close.
Yeah, so just referring back to the first picture that you had on the slide, so that was actually an example from the report that I shared as well. I think you had the one from Technical University Delft on, where the data steward, in that case, Jan Wang, she is also part of the this working group, highlighted how she is embedded in her organization, what kind of education, what kind of work experience, cultural background, personality traits she has. Personality traits, sorry. There was a line to this we did in that same report within different universities, University of Applied Sciences and University Medical Centers. We did a little bit of case studying. So we asked around what their role was and roles of data stewards in organizations, what kind of training they received, how they learned on the job, and the strengths and challenges, how data stewardship is positioned in their organizations. So I think that might also be a quite nice approach. It's a little bit more interview-like, but if this group is interested in coming back to that picture that you showed on the slide as well, this use case approach might be inspiring as well to take on, because it tells a little bit more the story, like how did I get here and how does my organization support me? I think that's some of the things that Anna-Lotte and others shared as well, whether organization is or isn't prepared for the role of the data steward. So that might be a nice tip as well, was maybe had that already in perspective, since you had Jan on the group as well, and she did that work. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Micah. So this is our BoF. I hope you're interested in this work. If it's, yay or nay, or I don't know. And as we said at one point, the case statement, I mean, you saw me scrolling through as well. It's drafted. It's quite an advanced draft that we hope to finish realistically by Christmas. I would want to say by the end of the month, but that I don't think is realistic. Realistically by Christmas, and we would really like to get working next year on this. So be in touch with me, with Elizabeth, if you're interested in contributing. I hope you left all your names in the rolling minutes, because what I would actually do when I get back home after the plenary, I would email all of you and ask, if you're interested in participating, and if you would also be willing to, be associated with the case statement as we submit it to TAB. So because we need to provide a list of potential initial members to the case statement. So, don't be a stranger. Come and ask questions. Let us know if you'd like to be involved. The latest when I email you about it. And thank you for coming today and for the conversation.